Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the witty and terrible literary escape room that is the Book Club Blind Entry podcast. My name is Casey, and I am your host. Every week, I read a book in its entirety and do research into the background of the book and its author. I then send my co-host a 10-page excerpt devoid of page numbers, a title, or the author. In the next 20 minutes, my co-host and I will try to reconcile our differing perspectives to see how much one socially distanced excerpt deviates from the meaning of the entire book. Today, my co-host is my friend, Anna. Hey, Anna, how you doing?
I use they, them pronouns, and I just read about God. Here we are. Just read a bunch about God.
Ooh, oh, wow. Golly gosh, gosh darn. Wow. How did this compare to what you normally read? Like, does this align with your normal preferences?
I haven't read anything since school ended. What do I have on my shelf here? I've got Swipe Right for Murder, Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens. I've got some D&D books. Casey, you were also raised in the UU church. Am I right about that?
We were both given a Bible.
Unitarian Universalist. Yes, we were. That's right. In youth group. Mine was purple, and it's somewhere in the house. So yes, we were both raised Unitarian Universalist, which is pretty much, in my opinion, it's more about the community than it is about, Jesus or any kind of scripture, which is very relaxing for me. But I still am a little uncomfortable reading about Christian texts or reading like Christian ideology, just because as a gay person and as a trans person, the practice of Christianity that is most prominent in mainstream churches right now has the tendency to be harmful and hateful and fearful. So yeah, I was a bit surprised to get off the bat in this text being like, come my child, let's talk about life and Jesus and God and etc. If I recall, I specifically requested that you send me terrible fan fiction, but this is okay too.
Could you consider it terrible fan fiction?
Isn't most of Christianity terrible fan fiction of the Bible? And isn't the Bible terrible fan fiction of if there was a real Jesus, of Jesus? It even says in this text, the people who wrote the Bible weren't actually acquainted with Jesus. They wrote it like hundreds of years or however many years after Jesus was around, if he was around.
So actually, would you mind running through your excerpt and outlining basically the main structure of it and what it said and what sorts of things were happening?
So the author is inhabiting either the voice of God or recording their conversation with God that they spiritually experienced, So first introduction of my passage was like, the perception of God's promise of love must be temptation from the devil because that promise is too big. Or like, oh, there's no way that God can promise to love us all because that is too big an ask. So that idea must be temptation from the devil to make us believe that God is good when actually God is, wrathful and jealous and etc. This passage talks a lot about how Christian ideology has been a little bit bastardized to make followers believe that God is vengeful and to be feared and is ultimately bad, when in this author's perception, I suppose, God is ultimately good, but also encompasses all that is bad. God is all that exists. So they are both good and bad and nothing and everything. There were two kind of rules to existence in my excerpt. It was like, you can be, do, and have whatever you imagine. And my note was, can I though? I need money, God. Like, if I want a yacht, I can't just have a yacht. And then you attract what you fear, which leads to emotion manifests. Like attracts like, the author goes into how exceptional energy can produce matter, which is not scientifically accurate, but I suppose they mean spiritual matter or attracting experiences rather than solid liquid gas. They talked about Adam and Eve making a wrong choice, quote unquote, introduced the concept of making a choice at all. They mentioned later, if God has rules that they want obeyed, then why do they create the idea or the concept of disobeying. If you're a train on a track and God lays down the track, then that is conceivably the only option that you can go to. So why would he not just make the train lay it on the track? Why should we be condemned for making the wrong choice if you put the wrong choice in front of us? It's literally like testing someone in a relationship. Those really toxic couples that are like, what do you think I'm most insecure about? And then the guy is like, I think you're most insecure about your ass. And then the girl is like, you think my ass is bad? That to me seems A, really toxic, and B, such heterosexual behavior. And C, I don't know if I equate that to how I picture God to be in this scenario. If we're talking about the mainstream Christian God that punishes you for doing wrong or disobeying him. They talk about the depiction of Eve as a temptress, set up women to be shown as man's downfall. And I thought that really rings true. You see like the Medusa and sirens and like fae creatures who lure men into the forest with their sensuality to take them off the track. There is no real reason for those creatures to be women except for like man love woman and woman sexy, and really sucks because women be like, I have my own character, thank you.
Can you imagine growing up in a world where the Bible wrote it so that homosexuality was the canon and heterosexuality was illegal, and then everyone had to suppress their heterosexuality and like go and pretend that they were homosexual?
Actually, what's interesting is I recently read a post that explained that the actual translation of either the Greek or the Latin, I'm not sure, it must have been Latin, for the passage that condemns homosexuality. The passage is, man shall not lie with another man as he lies with a woman, something like that. The actual translation is more closer to, man shall not lie with a young boy as he does with a woman. So it's actually condemning pedophilia, which, I mean, most normal people should agree with that. And yet there's a very evil relationship that often occurs between young boys in the church and higher ups and the powers and the cardinals, etc. Of course, it's not condemning every Catholic clergy, but it happens a lot and it sucks. And I wish that this was a more faithful translation of the Bible, other than someone along the lines mistranslated it just so slightly, and then it sort of slippery sloped into Westboro Baptist Church. The Westboro Baptist Church is the incredibly homophobic, transphobic, and like just all around hateful church in, I don't remember what state they're in. I think they're in Kentucky or Texas, one of the southern states. They're the ones who are sort of leading the charge against like God hates fags, God hates, God loves you, but only if you're X, Y, and Z. They're disgusting. See, going on. Thought is creative. The author gives 3 more rules or guidelines to life. Thought is creative, fear attracts like energy, and love is all there is. Which I agree. Love, ultimately, as cheesy as it sounds, it is, the driving force behind most of what people do. Throughout this excerpt, the author talks about masters. They don't actually say the master of anything. They just say the masters. So I assume that means like people who have mastered Christianity or people who have like the deepest understanding of God. Love everyone. If they're being murdered, they love their murderers. If they're being, persecuted, they love their oppressors. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Okay. It's bullshit. I mean, righteous indignation is such a natural part of human nature that it seems almost insane to me to get out of that mindset completely. I just said that love is very powerful, but I still want to get pissed at people if they slap me across the face.
It's like the MLK question.
Being kind and understanding and non-aggressive is important, surely, but at a certain point it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't make an impact. So loving everyone and being completely forgiving it seems impossible for me. It talks about 2 places of being, fear and love. And then there's a portion where they mention that there are no coincidences in the universe, which I don't know if I disagree with, because no one knows the truth about, how the universe works. I feel the no coincidences as a rule is very stifling. It's God's plan for the Holocaust to have happened. It's God's plan for slavery to happen. It's God's plan for, Stonewall to have happened. it kind of pisses me off. Talk about how God is in subtleties as well as the obvious. I should say, if it's not obvious by now, I'm atheist. Yeah, I'm atheist, but I am not an asshole about it. If God is a big comfort to you and you find guidance through him, then that is, your prerogative. Oh, also there was a line that really pissed me off. When they talk about like loving everyone and not, holding anger. Hitler went to heaven. When you understand this, you will understand God. And I said, what the fuck? The time travel agreement is if we have access to time travel, we go back and we kill Hitler. That is non-negotiable at this point. Hitler is bad. He put things into motion that killed a lot of people and enabled people to justify ideologies that are ultimately very hateful and harmful and, kill people. I guess I don't understand God because I don't understand why Hitler would go to heaven. So,
I mean, if it helps you, I read this entire book and I too don't understand God. So
well, that's good to know.
Yeah, but to me, that's not necessarily a bad thing, actually. It also sounds like you read this book kind of in the same manner in which I did, where you would stop maybe every 2 paragraphs or so because you would read a sentence that would just incense you and then just like go like thinking
evoke
off like into
emotional responses.
It was so hard for me to just absorb all of this because it went counter to so many of my personal experiences. Like, even when this guy was describing how he came to enter a conversation with this thing, with God, even then I was like, I was like really not. Like, and I thought it was really significant, regardless of the actual integrity or the logical consistency of what I was reading. I thought it was significant that I couldn't even just sit down and read this because of how intensely I expected to not like it.
Well, Casey, later in the thing, they say, if there was such thing as a sin, this would be it, to allow yourself to become what you are because of the experience of others. That's kind of what they're talking about, I guess. You're a sinner. You sinned because you have a preconceived experience of whatever and blah, blah, blah. First of all, I find, personal fault in this, but we'll talk about that later. Well, first of all, I appreciate the fact that they say there are no sins, but if there were a sin, then it would be this. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not going to hell for lust or whatever.
No comment.
I'm not saying I don't feel lust. I'm saying I'm glad I'm not going to hell for it. I mean, I'm sure this person is not saying, because you haven't experienced the specific, if someone puts their hand in a wood chipper and is like, ow, this hurts. Am I supposed to put my hand in the wood chipper and see if it hurts for myself? Or am I supposed to believe them and not put my hand in the wood chipper? I know I'm being kind of like a smart ass about that specific line, but it just really stuck out to me.
I know, this book made me meaner, and I feel like that wasn't the purpose.
I know, this made me feel like I'm really not one of those neckbeard atheists on Reddit, but this book made me kind of feel like that. I'm like,
it made the chin hairs wiggle a little bit.
Yeah, it made my neckbeard sprout out from my skin. Deity is all that there is, so lacks nothing and needs nothing, which I guess makes sense. But then do you think, did God create atheism? Actually, at the end of this excerpt, the person who was speaking to God asked a lot of questions that I want the answer to, which is I could go on a whole tangent about aliens and how there's definitely, other life out there, but is there life on other planets? And if you are God, are you the God of those planets as well? Do they have their own gods? What is the deal? The idea that in order to have a civilization, you must have some kind of concept of God, that rings false for me, because I feel that community is more important than having a religious higher power or perceived higher power. I just want to help my bros out, it doesn't need to be an act of God every time I spot my friend a $5 bill. It's just, human nature. But if God's created human nature, then what does that mean for humans? And if humans created God, then what does that mean?
I just imagine you praying and then your eyes rolling around in your skull. Just
what? And then they likened examining your life as if each value that you hold was a brick in your house, and you take out the brick and examine it, and if it's broken you replace it or update your structure, which I appreciate. That I wrote in my notes, Marie Kondo your values. I can appreciate that. The good thing about the human experience is, as get new experiences and you meet new people and you have new views on things and new perspectives, you update the values that you hold. There is no human condition that is permanent. It's like when I was in middle school and I was really into Invader Zim and Adventure Time, that was who I was at that moment, and that was the present, and so that was myself. Now that I still love TV shows and cartoons, but I don't revolve my personality around those things anymore because I just updated myself.
Yeah, I also figure that once you've encoded certain TV shows into your DNA, you no longer really need to think about them all that much. You just become them.
Yeah, you're right. That was the other thing. Does God know that people make like Waluigi porn? Does God know, blasphemy kink is a real thing? And does God know that people get off on disobeying or like dirtying holy spaces, etc.?
It's a kink.
Yeah, I'm interested in like pornography and fetish history. I think that's just a very interesting thing that I love to learn about. But it's very interesting to see the porn that someone would make of the Pringles guy, of Mr. Monopoly, of Wario and Waluigi. I think that the ways that people find sexuality in things is so interesting.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the part where God said that they started writing a book called God is a Meatball Sandwich, but I can't find it. I'm so upset. God damn it. That was such a good part. Wait, where is it? Shit. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Because I feel like that's kind of an answer to the question of like, would God? Yeah, I thought it was right here. Oh my God, I'm going crazy, Anna. I feel like God's just like fucking with me, trying to like pay any attention to this text right now. Like, no, like turn away. Don't try to overanalyze it. Just trust the truth that's in the text, because you can't look back at this. Here it is.
Page God.
God is in the sadness and the laughter, in the bitter and the sweet. There's a divine purpose behind everything, and therefore a divine presence in everything. And I think that the God in this book intends for that to extend to like Waluigi porn and the guy porn. I really do. I really do.
Because that's what you wanted to bring it back to.
Yeah, because it's like I once began writing a book called God is a Salami Sandwich. And that's part of God's plan. So why can't Waluigi porn be part of God's plan?
I think what I was getting at was, if God created everything and God has a set plan for everybody, if everything is God's plan, if God is everything that is, then what is the point of us being here, pretty much? So I don't know. Like I said before, it seems very stifling to me for God to have had a plan for everything.
It's almost like the mystique is such a huge part of the draw. It's so funny how like the controversy in itself and like the openness to create whatever explanation like will work for you seems almost a huge part of Christianity, which is why like whenever we start talking about it, we're like, well, I don't know, like I don't know about this and I don't know about that, but I do know that this was true. It's almost like Christianity is like the most orgasmic conspiracy that we've ever thought of since like 1300.
And also the fact is that we don't have facts about Christianity. As far as we know, there are no facts. Like, I don't know that Jesus was a real person.
I will tell you that during my gap year, I did spend a few days just researching the birth of Christianity for funsies, because I wanted to know like what historians say. The actual political shakedown for the circumstances surrounding Christianity are really interesting. The odds are, because of the way that Christianity formed, that Jesus did exist. It's like the guy that like founded the Mormons. You know how the whole region of upper rural New York became this breeding ground for new evangelical versions of Christianity, the Great Awakening? And that's when you had all these like subsects of faith start out. There was a similar occurrence of that happening. It was like a bunch of different subsects of Judaism. So Christianity actually was birthed out of all of these messiahs that were happening within Judaism in the Middle East, in where you had all of these different messiahs rising up in response to some oppression within the Roman Empire. And there were multiple messiahs, and Jesus was one of them. It was really interesting to read about. And I recommend reading about that because it's wild.
See, the only real Christian history that I super care about is the fact that the founder of the UU faith punched St. Nicholas in the face during the big. Listeners at home, Casey was just taking a big sip of her drink and started laughing. Yeah, St. Nicholas is Santa Claus.
Oh my God.
Or the person that Santa Claus is based off of.
Oh my God.
So it's kind of a running gag that like Santa doesn't care for UUs because our founder punched him in the face.
So can I read you 2 quotes from God from this book back to back that basically encapsulate my experience with reading this book?
Please do.
Okay. So quote 1, God starts out, I have heard the crying of your heart. I have seen the searching of your soul. I know how deeply you've desired the truth. In pain, you have called out for it, and in joy. Unendingly, you have beseeched me, show myself, explain myself, reveal myself. I am doing so here in terms so plain, you cannot misunderstand, in a language so simple, you cannot be confused, in vocabulary so common, you cannot get lost in the verbiage. Go ahead now, ask me anything, I will contrive to bring you the answer. So that's part 1. So then part 2 goes, then wrong is right and right is wrong. Yet I'll tell you this to step you out of your dilemma. Believe nothing I say. Simply live it, experience it, then live whatever other paradigm you want to construct. Afterward, you'll look to your experience to find your truth. That's my experience with this book.
That seems so, I mean, obviously it's contradictory, but that seems a little toxic. It's like you're gaslighting this person a little bit. They're like, hey, listen, I'm God. I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to tell you what's up, but also don't listen to me because, you know.
Another favorite quote from this book is, nor shall you covet your neighbor's spouse, for why would you want your neighbor's spouse when you know that all others are your spouse?
God is really like into the polyamorous lifestyle here. What does that mean?
Would you like another excerpt that makes you go like that? That makes you go, oh.
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
In matters of gross relationships, you recognize no in between. That is because gross relationships are always dyads, whereas relationships of the higher realm are invariably triads. Hence, since there is a left, right, up, down, big, small, fast, slow, hot, cold, and the greatest dyad ever created, male, female. There are no in-betweens in these dyads. There are no in-betweens, italics, no in-betweens.
Well, I guess I'm out. Bye. When was this book written?
1995.
Well, I mean, that checks out. But when you said that higher relationships are not dyads, but triads? That just reminded me of the meme where it's like a man and a woman in a bed, and he's got a speech bubble that says I consent, and she's got a speech bubble that says I consent, and then Jesus has a speech bubble that says I don't. It's like, get out of my business, dude. Leave me and my wife alone. Jesus.
So I found this book very frustrating to read, and again, I'm going to say that I actually think this made me a meaner person after putting the book down. But there were ideas in here that I really liked, and also the things that I came up with to counter what was getting said in this book, I also really liked. So it was actually really helpful, because in realizing that I disagreed with so many different things that were said in here, I was able to articulate a form of spirituality that I actually ascribed to that I wasn't aware of beforehand. I was like, oh, I don't believe that because I believe this. And I was like, whoa, I believe that. So that was really cool. So yeah, so this is a book called Conversations with God. It is part of a 3-part series. Mm-hmm. It is written by a Catholic. by Neil Donald Walsh, and it was written when he was in his 50s. And he was kind of at the end of his rope, and he was really frustrated with his relationship with Christianity because he'd been studying theological texts for a while. So he said that he decided to like just sit down and then angrily write out all of these things to God that he wanted to say. And then without prompting to, something picked up the pen and wrote back to him and said like, "Hey there, I'm God, let's talk." I was so thrown by all of the content of this book that just really, I was just, again, like you, I was like spiraling into oblivion that I didn't have that much time to do all that much research into Neil Donald Walsh. What I will tell you though is that I found that I really liked the 1-star review festival that I compiled for my last episode. And I have assembled a 1-star review festival for you. The 1-star reviews were actually rather sparse because this book has a 4.18 rating out of 5 on Goodreads. But we can talk about that later. So I think I'm going to start with like the least good one, and then I will go to the one that I liked the most. I guess the least good one was phenomenal, 1 star.
Oh, okay. That's really funny. I love it when like old people do that, where they're like, 1 star means it's number 1.
Number 2 is complete heretical garbage, and that's all they wrote. That's the only one. The third one is similar along those lines, and it goes, evil, all caps, period. An evil man trying desperately to justify his evil life.
I too am an evil man living my evil life.
All right, so here's the fourth one. Anyone who this is a Christian God is very stupid. All caps, this is the devil. He, Evan, tells you it's the devil. He tells us many times. Sin, pride, vanity gives it away. This book is poison. I can honestly believe they are making a film about it. The devil gonna have its own film. Type Peter Hockley 4 Nights with the Devil YouTube. So there is a Christian God. That's what I got from this book.
What?
All right.
What star?
Are you ready for the best review that I found?
Oh God, yes, please.
Okay, here we go. All right. Recipe for Conversations with God alphabet soup. Number 1, carefully rip out all of the pages of Conversations with God close to the binding. Attempt to make the rips as clean as possible. If this is difficult, use scissors. Can be done 5 or 6 pages at a time. Set aside in a neat stack. Number 2, discard binding. Number 3, in a very large stock pot, add equal parts water and saccharin, bring to a boil. Maybe the saccharin will melt, maybe it won't. I've never tried this recipe, but trust me, saccharin is a key ingredient. Turn off the heat. Number 4, plug in and turn on the paper shredder. 5, in small batches, carefully shred Conversations with God according to manufacturer's directions. Cross-shredding works best. Set aside in 6 small artistically arranged piles. 6, locate yellow pages. Look up butcher who carries specialty meats. 7, dial number. Ask butcher to reserve 6 pounds of tripe. 8, retrieve tripe from the butcher. 9, rinse and pat dry. 10, over medium flame, alternate pound of tripe with 1 pile of cross-shredded Conversations with God in the saccharin water. 11, boil the hell out of it. 12, bon appetit with 1 P.
Bon appetit. That's a lot of protein, dude. Wow, yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah, well, unless you have any other curiosities about this book, I don't want to give the rest of it away because I'm extremely anxious that you will then enthusiastically pick up this book and just rip your way right through it. Am I right?
I know. I'm so eager to learn more about how there's only men and women and God says do this, but don't do this.
But anyway, this is really the whole podcast. So this has been the Book Club Blind Entry podcast. Thank you so much for coming on, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Me too. I feel like I've learned a lot about God and what this guy thinks about God, and also how to make alphabet soup. So that's been really valuable.
Really sweet alphabet. Wait a minute. There's no alphabet. I guess, is the alphabet the letters of the book?
Yeah, because you're going to cross shred it. Next time that I don't like a book, I'm going to post a recipe for it.
Yeah, please do.
Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, and I will see you next time with a new co host.